Tuesday, November 14th. I'm your host, Sarah Beal. On today's show, we'll talk with the chair of the Disability Commission, Merrill Blum. He will fill us in on all the great work they are doing here in the town. Then we'll get a legislative update from State Rep Will Crocker. And finally, we'll close out the show with DPW Director Dan Santos. But first, let's get a look at today's top headlines. The DPW will be installing a new four-way stop at Strawberry Hill Road at Old Craigville Road, Centerville. This work is tentatively scheduled for the week of November 20th, subject to weather. Advanced warning signs will be installed, as well as temporary red flags and reflective strips on the signposts to alert drivers to the new stop signs, where there were none before. Stop signs exist on Old Craigville Road. These signs will be modified to alert drivers to the all-way stop. Demolition has begun on the Osterville Bay School. The abatement work at the Osterville Bay School was completed on Thursday, November 2nd, and the town received the asbestos clearance letter from Fuss & O'Neill, the town's consultant. As the building is torn down, materials will be categorized, separated, and trucked off-site. Demolition work is expected to be completed in December. The town of Barnstable is pleased to announce the Hyannis Home Buyer Assistance Program. Eligible first-time home buyers may receive up to $75,000 to purchase a home as their primary residence in the village of Hyannis. Preference may be given to those purchasing within the downtown Hyannis Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy area. Assistance is provided as a zero-interest deferred payment second mortgage loan. Home buyers are required to invest a minimum of 1.5% of the purchase price of the home. To learn more, visit www.townofbarnstable.us/HHAP. Up next, we will learn about the Disability Commission with Chair Merrill Blum. Merrill, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the Disability Commission. So let's start with, what exactly is the Disabilities Commission?
Disability Commission is made up of 10 people at the moment, whose function is to advise the town councils matters relating to ADA, along with we do some funding of 501c3s. And we're about two things, actually. One is access, and the other is awareness.
Wonderful.
And those are our major functions.
That's great. How did you get involved with the Disability Commission?
I've been on other areas. I've served on other commissions or committees. I started out when we moved here about 13 years ago on the Human Services Committee, and then into affordable housing. And when I retired, about the time I was getting retired, there were some spots open on the Disabilities Commission. My wife has a disability, so it just seemed something that I was gravitated to, and I've enjoyed being on it now for 6 years.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really great. I know you guys do some really great work. And when you say ADA, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act, correct?
That's correct. Originally formulated in 1990, and has had some subsequent revisions, 2008, 2015, and court decisions have changed it periodically.
Wonderful. Now you guys have done a lot of work. You gave me a list here of some things that you guys have worked on. So let's go over a couple of these. I know one of the big things that you have the guide over there. You did the Accessible Dining Guide. I know that was a few years ago. It's a wonderful tool.
Yeah, we publish this every couple of years, where we're starting to work on a 2018 version of it. And essentially it has to do with access and facilities within restaurants, mainly in the downtown Hyannis area, Main, North, and South Streets. It's just a guide for residents as well as tourists. We pay for it, obviously, out of our funds, and it gives the populace that comes in during the tourist season. And we get a number of people that are handicapped that come into town, so it gives them an idea where they go, where they won't have barriers to their facilities.
That's wonderful. You've also done some work with handicap parking and placards and plates. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Glad you brought that up.
Yes, I know. That's a big one.
Yeah, that's our major function. One of our major functions at the moment. We're working with the parking and coordinator now, and we're working on striping and signage. Signage is a big thing. They've changed signage recently, so we're working with them on those areas that need to be amended, as it were. The other thing that we're working on is we've just completed the surveys on the beaches. and we are working with the new town engineer, and we will be adjusting, or they will be adjusting the areas in which we'll have access to handicap parking. So that's a major area for us. Along with a segue into that are the placards and license plates. It's come to light recently that the number of people are receiving, if you're not parking correctly, you're going to get tagged. We have a couple of parking administrators that survey parking areas. If you're not parked correctly, or your placard is not displayed properly, you will get tagged. So it has to be suspended from your mirror, and there is a date of expiration, as well as there's a photo on it which is covered for privacy reasons. So there's a number and there's a date of expiration on it. And that has to be displayed so the parking administrators can view it readily. Another thing that has occurred, or does occur, that in parking there will people that will stray over into these striped areas. And those are there for a reason. They're two striped areas. One is a 5-foot area, which is between parking locations, parking handicapped spaces. And then there's one for vans, and that's an 8-foot space. And if you can imagine being in a van and you have a power lift and you can't get out of your van because someone is parked over that striped area, then that's an issue. So you will get tagged. It's something that people should be more aware of, that those features are there for safety reasons and for access reasons.
What else is there that the Barnstable Disability Commission has worked on that you want to make sure people are understanding of and aware of?
Okay. Some of the things that we have done in the last year or so, as I say, we do some 501c3s who come in for funding. This year we have funded a program for Sail Cape Cod. We tentatively have targeted some funds for signage and striping for the town through the parking coordinator's position. We just granted CORD $2,000 for their mobile food pantry.
Oh, wonderful.
In the past, we have put up money for the Enoch Cobb Early Learning Center for the playground equipment. It was kind of a leveraged area where we put up some money, the LaRusso Fund put up some money, and one of the banks put up some money. And that's really a terrific program, for kids. We had done a lot for, and the reasoning behind it was we had done a lot for older individuals, but nothing for our younger generation. So when this came about, I think starting in 2015, it was brought up. We said, gee, that's a natural for us to take a position in. So we did put up $35,000, and all the playground equipment was purchased through that grant. We have funded the Challenger program a couple of times. We just paid for last season's, most of last season's softball program. So we granted them $5,000 for that program. We also have paid for path mats, which is access to the beach at Sandy Neck. We did one at Millway, and we had like a matching grant with Dowse's Beach out in Katuitt. The other thing is that just came about is we have a diagram for a new access to the boardwalk at Colville's Beach, a new ramp. We also, in our survey process, we also try and be a consultant to either the town or to businesses or whatever institution that needs assistance with becoming compliant with ADA regs. And we, in the process, we use what they call AAB, which is Architectural Access Board rules and regulations. There's a federal set of regulations, there's a local set, municipal set, and then there's the state, which is the Massachusetts AB. We tend to look more closely and be more observant with the state rules and regulations. And they're great help. We are also connected with what they call MOD, which is the Mass Office on Disability. We actually hosted a meeting for them at the Youth Center, which is where we hold our meetings, in August. They came to us earlier in this year and asked us to hold a meeting. We wound up with almost 40 commissioners from the South Coastal area attending, which was kind of nice. It was a good meeting.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let people know when you guys meet. You guys are meeting actually this Wednesday.
That's correct.
At the, like you said, the Hyannis Youth Community Center. You meet at, is it 10 a.m.?
10 a.m., 10 to 12. Sometimes it runs a little bit longer depending upon what we have. We usually have a pretty full agenda. We also have a meeting. Again, as I indicated earlier, we try to have somebody from the town. We have Brian Florence that's going to be attending our meeting, who's a new building commissioner.
Oh, wonderful.
Last month we had Elizabeth Jenkins, because we've been working on a major, every town is required to have what they call a self-evaluation transition plan. Every 7 years it has to be revised. Well, the last one was 2010, which means that 2017 is a revision year. So we've been working with planning and development on revising the self-evaluation and revision plan. So Elizabeth was there, and a couple of her people were there.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us all about everything that you guys are doing in the Disability Commission. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the hard work that you guys do.
Thank you for having me. It was enjoyable.
Well, thank you. My guest today is Merrill Blum. He's the chair of the Barnstable Disability Commission. Coming up, we'll check in with DPW Director Dan Santos, but first, let's get a legislative update from State Rep Will Crocker. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. The session is starting to wind down. We're getting towards the end of the year, but we wanted to do a nice little update with you on some of the things that we're working on. Last week, the charter question was on the ballot here in the town of Barnstable, and that passed, and you had a big part in getting that onto the ballot. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, thank you very much for having me, first of all, but I was at the beginning and at the total end. I was part of this whole process. As a town councilor, I was on the town council subcommittee, which came up with the recommendations for the charter changes, which went to the town council. We approved them on the town council, and then as a state rep, it's a home rule petition because it changes the structure of town government, and therefore by constitution has to go to be approved by the Massachusetts House and the Massachusetts Senate. So we went through the entire legislative process, from committee hearings to testifying on the bill to shepherding it through the long process in the House, then doing the same exact thing in the Senate, and then eventually back to the town, which is what we had said originally when we came up with the recommendations, is that these will not become law unless the voters of the town approve them. And last Tuesday they did, and I'm very happy that we were able to be part of the process, to be able to, from beginning to end, to be able to kind of change the town government and just kind of modernize a couple of things about it.
Yeah, it's important to kind of do that every once in a while, kind of check things and be like, okay, what could we, is there some things that we can change and do differently? So it's really interesting that you got to do it from beginning to end as the town councilor and then as our state representative. So that's really great. So thank you for doing that.
Well, that's I don't want to make light of it, but that's my job.
Yeah.
I mean, I very much enjoy doing home rule petitions. The town has I've got 4 home rule petitions in this term. We've gotten through 2 of them. I've got 2 more to go. So it's part of my job. I enjoy it very much.
It's a great way to kind of represent the town and be our voice up on Beacon Hill by doing these home rule petitions, so that's great. The other thing we wanted to talk about is you guys have been working on, up on the State House, criminal justice reform. What exactly is going on with that?
The House has taken up a measure that has already been approved in the Senate, so we're kind of working backwards on this thing. Usually things start in the House and go to the Senate, but in this case, the Senate has already approved some criminal justice reform, and the House is taking it up this week. One of the major things that the House is looking at is mandatory minimum sentences. Right now, there are mandatory minimum sentences for offenses. Particularly, we're looking at drug offenses, and there's been a lot of call and a lot of talk about mandatory minimum sentences for people who are convicted of drug possession, but not drug distribution, not drug dealing. There's been a lot of discussion about getting rid of mandatory minimum sentences for people who are caught with a small amount of drugs and convicted, and instead of giving them jail time, giving them incarceration, getting them into programs. Because for 3 years I worked at the Bristol County House of Correction, and I saw these people who had been convicted of offenses of just possession. What happens when you're convicted is you will go into jail, but you won't get the services. Many jails don't have the services that you need to be able to straighten your life out and be. First of all, I mean, when you go to jail, it's just cold turkey. In many places that you won't get the help that you get. You will just stop getting the drug, and that's a difficult thing. And if you don't get the services you need, there's a much greater chance for you to be able to relapse once you're out of jail and once you're back into society again. And mandatory minimums, getting rid of mandatory minimums for low-level people who are just convicted of possession, is something that we're discussing this week up there, and there's been many major call for getting rid of that. Not getting rid of offenses with regard to drug dealers, people who sell the drugs to these people, but just the people who are the victims of it, basically, the people who are addicted and need the help.
That's wonderful. It's so great to hear that, you know, you're taking the House and the House of Representatives and the Senate are taking that on. So it's wonderful to hear that that's, you know, something that you're taking very seriously. It's great that you have that background so you can understand it fully, you know, all the way around. And it's like sometimes it's hard for people to kind of grasp. They say, oh, you're just, you know, a drug addict, you need to be in jail. And it's like, no, there's a whole person there. And it's great that you have that background working in the House of Correction to kind of know that that's what it is.
When I was working at the Bristol County House of Correction, I can tell you that anywhere between 60–70% of the people, men and women, who were there for their offenses, and they're short terms, no more than 2.5 years, but most of them were there because of some sort of drug offense, buying, using, that kind of thing. So, you know, they're low level and they're victims, and we need to get them the treatment and the help they need. Right.
Now the session is starting to wind down. You guys are going to, you know, take a few weeks off, and then you'll come back in January. Is there anything we should look forward to next year?
Well, we are, as you say, we're finishing up this week. It's the last week. We're working on criminal justice reform, and then we'll be off until January of next year, and it all sort of resets all over again. Yeah. It'll be time for filing bills, time to begin to look, believe it or not, start beginning to look at a budget for the next fiscal year, which will start next July 1, and that process begins in January. Yep. Right after the holidays, we start all over again.
Yep, jump in feet first.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming in today and talking to us about everything that you're working on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. My guest today is Will Crocker. He's the state rep in the 2nd Barnstable District. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a while since you've been on the show, and we want to talk a little bit about some road work. There's been a lot going on this fall, and I know it tends to kind of wrap up when the colder weather comes in. So what can you tell me about the road work that we've been seeing?
Okay, well, there's a variety of road work by different agencies. The Public Works Department is doing some. We do our annual maintenance and repaving, then the state is doing some as well. We just finished up Seaview Ave in Osterville, where we put new pavement down from Weano Ave all the way out to just past Eel River Road, and new striping. So that was a big project out in Osterville we just finished up. We are keeping track of and working closely with the state on a couple of projects they have going. The most obvious being the 2 on Route 28, one at Bursa's Way in Route 28 here, which is a multi-season project that'll probably be a year from now when they do the final cleanup, and that involves moving utility poles and new water lines and sidewalks and new signals and widening the road and turning lanes, and it's just a huge project which will bring a lot more safety to the roadway between the intersection here and the signal behind the mall. They're also looking at possibly, they have some extra money, the state extending this project from the intersection westward to past the Pitcher's Way intersection, which it's state money. We're happy to have them do it. And I think the police are doing a good job. I don't really see too difficult backups. I mean, you got to wait a little bit, but
yeah. I drive through that intersection every morning, and sometimes you don't know what you're going to get, but they do a really good job of directing the traffic and telling everybody where they need to go. So
yeah, I think that's going well. We haven't had any complaints. And then further west on 28, the state, through their contractor Lawrence Lynch, is putting a new signalized intersection at Strawberry Hill Road and Route 28 by the CVS there. And that's a much smaller project, which should be done this fall, which is putting crosswalks in, four-way crosswalks and handicap ramps and access and new signal, and a little more sight distance benefit for drivers. So that's a nice project, which should be finishing up soon.
Great.
We're working, if anyone's been around Main Street, we've been working there a couple of weeks. That's to improve the crosswalks and the intersection between the crosswalks and the sidewalks themselves on Main Street. What we did a survey last year and identified areas where we needed better handicap access, where we had trip hazards or broken concrete. And so we've gone throughout Main Street on the north and south side, fixing those areas, and that'll be wrapped up this fall as well. I know they're doing some brick work today where they're tying that back into the old work. And I think it's been it's a great project, ultimately, for pedestrians because it makes our roadways more accessible and safer. But, there's been a little pain with it because people have had to work around the construction, and we have signs directing that this crosswalk isn't open, go to the next one. And so we had to balance that, and I think that's worked okay, but I think some people have been a little frustrated with it, but that's understandable, and it happens with these construction projects. It's hard to avoid some inconvenience, either for drivers or pedestrians, but we always try to minimize that impact.
Yeah, and I think pedestrians aren't used to having to, make adjustments like you would if you were in a car.
Exactly.
But it'll be well worth it in the end.
Yes, I believe so as well. And the shanties, new shanties going in behind Town Hall, the walkway to the sea, and they poured the foundations, and those will start going up here in the next week or so. The buildings themselves, so that's a nice addition to our arts program.
And those ones will be up year-round. They won't be like the ones down at the harbor that need to come out, correct?
Correct. They won't be moving.
Wonderful.
They may not be open year-round,
right,
but they'll be there permanently.
Yep. Very cool. Okay, and we definitely want to let everyone know, snow and ice is coming. We had a little bit of a cold snap over the weekend, Friday to Saturday. It was a little chilly, but it's always on the mind. What can you tell us about what we're working on to get ready for this cold weather that's coming?
Yes, well, we've been very busy, and one of the biggest things that we need to do in the fall as we move into winter is make sure we have not only our own equipment ready to go, but all of our contractors in place. And we have about 85 snow and ice contractors, so all of those have to have a contract in place, and they have to have their equipment inspected. On November 30th, we have a meeting, and we go through with all the contractors present, do that at the senior center, and it's explained to them again. They get their routes, what we expect as far as response times and during the storm, and how they process payments, so that's all ready to go. The other thing that we give them at that time is the GPS transponders that we use, so we know when they're working and where they're working, or if there's issues, we can track that down with the GPS system. And so that's a big administrative program, but the better we do with that, it becomes a more seamless transition into when we have real snow and ice events or black ice calls or salting that we need to do, that people are ready to go. And you can't have really a learning curve with that. You got to be able to hit the ground running and have it be effective first time it's needed. And so that's our goal, and that's why we do all this work in advance of
a snow and ice event coming.
Yeah.
Well, I know that the residents really appreciate all the hard work you put into it. I know it's a big project that you guys take on. Are you still looking for contractors, or are you all set for the year?
Yeah, we are right now. I think we're all set. We have a list of those that are waiting.
Oh, good.
If some don't return or turn out or work out.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dan, for joining us and giving us these road work updates and getting us a heads up on what's going to be coming up with snow and ice. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
My guest today is Dan Santos. He's the Director of Public Works here in the town of Barnstable. Now let's take a look at our community calendar. Knitting for a Cause meets every Tuesday at the Centerville Library. This group makes mittens, shawls, hats, scarves for local nursing homes, shelters, and other places in need. No need to sign up in advance. Just show up. Or you can contact Judy at 508-863-9317 for questions or for yarn, needles, or patterns. Knitters meet in the Coyle Community Room at the library every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Now let's take a look at this week's board, committee, and commission schedule. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow with another all-new show. On tomorrow's show, we will talk with Barnstable Police Chief Paul McDonald. We'll talk to County Register of Deeds Jack Mead. And finally, we'll learn all about the current artwork on display in Town Hall with artist Betsy Payne Cook. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Beal.